In the quiet hills of Appalachia, some stories are told in whispers, passed from one porch to another. But Mariah's story was one she lived in silence, a daily testament to a strength no one cared to see. For the people in her small, judgmental town, she was a cautionary tale. The single mother, the woman left behind. But for the two small children who called her Mama, she was the entire world. This is the story of how a life defined by hardship was quietly witnessed by a stranger, and how that simple act of seeing someone threatened to change everything. The creek was Mariah's sanctuary and her workplace. Long before the sun crested the misty peaks, she would make the familiar trek down the slick, mossy path, a heavy laundry basket digging into her hip. The water, cold enough to make her bones ache, was a constant in her life. It was here she washed away the dirt of others, and here she tried to wash away her own anxieties. On this morning, the air had a particular bite, a damp chill that promised a long day. She knelt on her usual flat rock, the surface worn smooth over years of her labor. She plunged her chapped hands into the icy current, the shock of the cold a familiar jolt that focused her mind. One by one, she scrubbed the garments, her knuckles raw, her movements rhythmic and powerful. Each shirt, each pair of jeans, was a small victory. A few more coins toward dinner, a little more time bought against the ever-present threat of hunger. She worked with her head down, a curtain of dark hair shielding her face. It was easier that way. It helped her ignore the phantom stares and the whispers that seemed to follow her even here. She didn't need to see the pity or the scorn in people's eyes. She could feel it. Her world had shrunk to this creek, this basket, and the two small heartbeats waiting for her back at the cabin, Peter and Anna. Their names were a silent prayer on her lips. She pictured their sleeping faces, innocent and untouched by the town's harsh judgment. They were the reason for this back-breaking work, the purpose that propelled her out of bed each morning. For them, she would endure anything, the cold, the gossip, the crushing loneliness. A sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves in the trees above, and for a moment, Mariah felt a profound sense of being watched. She paused, her hands still in the water, and scanned the dense woods on the opposite bank. Nothing, just shadows and the shifting patterns of early morning light. Shaking her head, she dismissed the feeling. It was just the weariness playing tricks on her mind. She was wrong. Hidden by the thick trunk of an old oak tree, a man stood perfectly still. His name was Andrew, and he was new to this town, a stranger to its intricate web of stories. He hadn't meant to spy, but the sight of the lone woman working with such fierce, quiet determination had stopped him in his tracks. He saw not a victim, but a warrior. And in that moment, without a single word exchanged, his story began to intertwine with hers. The walk home was a different kind of burden. The laundry basket, now heavier with wet clothes, was a familiar ache in her arms. But the heavier weight was the one she carried through the town's main street. Here, she was not just Mariah. She was that woman, a label branded on her by gossip and circumstance. As she passed the general store, two women stopped their conversation to watch her, their eyes following her with a mixture of pity and disdain. Mariah focused on a point in the distance, her jaw set. She had learned to build an invisible wall around herself, a fortress of pride to protect the fragile parts of her heart. The whispers were like arrows, but she refused to let them see her bleed. Wears herself to the bone for those kids, one might say, sounding almost sympathetic before the other added, well, she should have thought of that before. Her cabin, small and weathered, was a refuge. The moment she stepped inside, the outside world and its judgments fell away. Two small bodies crashed into her legs, their laughter the sweetest sound she knew. Peter with his serious eyes, and Anna with her wild, bright smile, saw only their mother. Their love was a shield, more powerful than any wall she could build. "Mama, you're back!" Anna squealed, her arms wrapped tightly around Mariah's knees. In their presence, the weight on her shoulders lessened. She was not a cautionary tale here. She was a queen in a kingdom of two, her domain a small, clean cabin, filled with a love that poverty couldn't touch. She prepared a simple lunch of beans and cornbread, the smell filling the small space with a sense of home. While they ate, she listened to their stories about a ladybug they found, her mind momentarily free from the worries of overdue rent and dwindling supplies. Later, as she hung the clothes on the line, the scent of clean laundry filling the air, she allowed herself a moment of peace. She watched her children chase each other in the yard, their joy pure and uncomplicated. They were her reason, her purpose, her everything. That night, long after their soft breathing filled the quiet cabin, Mariah lay awake, staring at the familiar cracks in the ceiling. The day's fatigue had settled deep into her muscles, but her mind wouldn't rest. She thought of the feeling of being watched at the creek, a sensation that lingered with an unsettling persistence. She whispered her nightly prayer into the darkness, a simple plea for strength. She didn't ask for miracles, only for the will to face another day. She didn't know that a quiet observer from the woods was about to become an unexpected answer. The sound of laughter woke Mariah before the sun. Peeking through the small window, she saw Peter and Anna already in the yard, their small forms silhouetted against the pale dawn. They were playing with their collection of treasures. Bottle caps served as tiny cars, and smooth, flat stones were plates for an imaginary feast. A weary smile touched Mariah's lips. Their ability to create joy from nothing was a constant, gentle miracle. She joined them outside, the damp morning air cool on her skin. She scooped Peter into her arms, his small body warm against hers, and showered his face with kisses. "You two are my greatest treasures," she whispered, her gaze including Anna, who beamed at the praise. Despite the hardship that defined their lives, Mariah knew she possessed a wealth no money could buy, the fierce, unconditional love of her children. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and water, they made their way down to the creek together. It was part of their routine. Mariah had to work, and the children came with her, carrying small, empty buckets as if they were essential assistants on a grand mission. To them, this wasn't a chore, it was an adventure with their mother. As Mariah knelt by the water's edge and began the arduous task of washing, she watched Peter and Anna play nearby. Their laughter echoed in the quiet clearing, a bright, cheerful sound that softened the edges of her exhaustion. They splashed at the water's edge, their small hands searching for interesting rocks and brave little crayfish. For a moment, Mariah closed her eyes, soaking in the sound, grateful for the strength to continue fighting for them. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, bringing a moment of peace. But even in that tranquility, a familiar, nagging question surfaced in her mind. How much longer can I do this alone? The thought was a cruel reminder of her own fragility, a shadow that even the brightest morning couldn't entirely chase away. And it's here that I want to pause and ask you, the one following this story, how many times have you felt like giving up, but found the strength to carry on for someone you love? If Mariah's journey has already touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It ensures you won't miss a single chapter of this powerful story of struggle and hope. Mariah didn't know it, but as she fought for dignity in the quiet solitude of her simple life, someone was watching her, paying attention to every detail of her routine, and that person was about to change everything. The sun was higher now, beating down with an unusual warmth for the season. Mariah kept her head down, her arms moving in a steady, practiced rhythm as she rinsed the heavy fabrics. Sweat trickled down her temples, mingling with the cold creek water she splashed on her face. She was so focused on finishing her work before dusk that she didn't notice him at first. On the opposite bank, partially hidden by the low-hanging branches of a willow tree, a man stood watching her. It was Andrew. He had been drawn back to this spot, intrigued by the woman he had seen the day before. He saw the raw strength in the set of her shoulders, the fierce determination in her movements. He didn't see her with the pity or contempt she was so used to. He saw her with a quiet, profound respect. When Maria finally sensed his presence, a jolt of fear went through her. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she remembered the leering glances she sometimes received from men who thought her desperate and alone. She instinctively pulled her worn cardigan tighter, her hands clenching into fists as she tried to ignore the stranger. Andrew, however, made no move to approach. He simply stood there, his posture relaxed, as if he were merely observing the landscape. There was a calmness about him that was disarming. He wasn't just looking at a woman washing clothes, he was seeing a warrior hidden in plain sight. Maria took a deep breath, forcing herself to return to her work. She pretended she hadn't seen him, but the feeling of being watched prickled at the back of her neck. Every time she plunged a sheet into the water, her eyes would dart discreetly toward the figure across the creek. Her children, lost in their own world of play, were oblivious to their mother's tension. Peter and Anna chased a frog near the water's edge, their laughter a stark contrast to the silent standoff happening just yards away. After several long minutes, Andrew turned and walked away, disappearing back into the dense woods as quietly as he had appeared. Maria let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She was relieved, but also curious. Who was this man? And why did his gaze feel so different from the others? On the walk back to the cabin, she couldn't get his image out of her mind. There had been something in his eyes, not judgment, but a shared sense of humanity. Still, years of betrayal and hardship had taught her to be wary. Fear and suspicion were her oldest, most trusted companions. She didn't know it yet, but this stranger was destined to cross her path again, and his presence would challenge the very walls she had built around her heart. The next morning, Maria returned to the creek even earlier than usual, hoping to avoid another encounter. She carried her basket of laundry and a heart heavy with the memory of the man who had watched her. Every step on the familiar path echoed her fear of being judged, of being seen as a target once again. As she knelt by the water, she plunged her hands into the frigid current, letting the sharp cold ground her. The work was demanding, but it offered a kind of solace, a quiet space where the town's whispers couldn't reach. It was here, between the soap and the stones, that Maria found a small refuge from her pain. Suddenly, the snap of a twig behind her sent a jolt of adrenaline through her veins. She spun around to see the same man from the day before, standing just a few yards away. Her immediate instinct was to protect her children. She called them to her side, her voice sharp with alarm. Andrew, sensing her fear, held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice steady and calm. Maria didn't answer, her eyes narrowed with suspicion, watching him as one might watch a predator. He took a half step forward but maintained a respectful distance. "I just wanted to help. I've seen you here every day. You shouldn't have to carry this burden alone." The words were so unexpected, so different from what she was used to, that they hung in the air between them. A surge of defensive anger rose in Maria. "I don't need your help. I can take care of myself," she retorted, her voice firm, though her eyes betrayed the unshed tears of 1,000 lonely struggles. How many times had she heard empty promises? How many times had she trusted, only to be left more broken than before? Andrew simply nodded, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He didn't push. "I respect that," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know that I admire your strength." With that, he gave a small, respectful nod and retreated back into the trees, disappearing as quietly as he had come. Maria remained frozen for a long moment, her heart pounding in her chest. What did he want? Why did his words feel so different from the usual contempt? She tried to dismiss the encounter, to force the confusion from her mind, but she couldn't. Something inside her had been stirred. On the walk home, Andrew's face kept reappearing in her thoughts. She was suspicious, yes, but she was also intrigued. For the first time in a very long time, someone had looked at her and seen not a burden, but a warrior. In the days that followed, Maria returned to the creek, trying to ignore the memory of Andrew, but her heart hammered in her chest every time she heard a rustle in the woods. She feigned concentration on her work, secretly hoping he wouldn't appear again. But one sunny morning he was there. This time he didn't hide. He sat on a large boulder a respectful distance away, watching her in silence. Mariah tried to ignore him, but his presence filled the entire clearing, making it impossible not to be aware of him. The silence between them was heavy, charged with unspoken questions. Every splash of water seemed amplified. Her children, however, were unbothered, their laughter a cheerful counterpoint to their mother's inner turmoil. Mariah found herself caught between fear and a burgeoning curiosity. Finally, Andrew spoke, his voice gentle. "I know you don't trust me, but I just want to understand. Where does someone so young find so much strength?" Mariah stopped her work for a second, glanced at him, and then looked away. She didn't answer, but his question resonated deep within her. He continued, his tone full of respect. "I've been through some hard times myself. Maybe not the same as yours, but I know what it's like to fight alone." His words pierced through her defenses, striking a chord of pain she kept hidden even from herself. She took a deep breath. She didn't want to open up, didn't want to appear weak, but at the same time, she felt a strange desire to believe him. There was something different in his gaze. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't judgment. It was sincere, human empathy. Still, her reply was clipped. "I don't have a choice. Either I'm strong or my children suffer." Andrew simply nodded, accepting her boundary. He didn't press further, just sat in silence, his presence a quiet testament to his patience. When her work was done, Mariah gathered her laundry and called her children. As she glanced back at Andrew, she saw something unexpected in his eyes. Admiration. It was a look that acknowledged her struggle without diminishing her dignity. On the way home, her heart was a tangled mess of confusion. She didn't know if she was facing a threat or a miracle. But one thing was certain. Andrew was unlike anyone she had ever met. And destiny, it seemed, was already preparing their next encounter. Mariah was used to the town's whispers, but in the days since Andrew started appearing at the creek, the pressure had intensified. The stares became heavier, the comments more venomous. "Look at her," one of the women from the church sewing circle said, not bothering to lower her voice. Didn't take long for her to find someone new to latch onto. She pretended not to hear, but each word was a fresh wound. Everything she did was for Peter and Anna, yet the judgment felt like invisible chains trying to drag her down. Sometimes she wondered how long she could withstand the weight of their opinions. That afternoon, walking back from the creek, she passed two women on the porch of the general store who snickered as she went by. Mariah clutched the laundry basket tighter and quickened her pace, focusing only on the path home. In her mind, a single question echoed. Why was it so hard for people to see the truth instead of spreading poison? At home, Anna sensed her mother's sadness and ran to her, holding out a dandelion she had picked from the yard. "This is for you, Mama, because you're the strongest person in the world." Mariah knelt, hugged her daughter tightly, and let a few silent tears fall. It was in the small, innocent hands of her children that she found the will to keep going. Later that night, alone in her room, she thought of Andrew. She remembered the way he looked at her, not with judgment, but with admiration. Was he really different? Or was she just fooling herself again? The doubt gnawed at her tired heart. And you, who are listening to this story, how many times have you felt judged by people who didn't know your struggle? Mariah lives with this every day, yet she remains steadfast for her children. If her story has moved you, take a moment now to subscribe and leave a like. That way you can follow this mother's journey of courage to the very end. Mariah didn't know it, but the town's gossip was only just beginning, and Andrew's persistence was about to test her greatest fear, trusting someone again. It was a cold morning when Mariah found something unexpected on her doorstep. A small parcel wrapped in simple brown paper. When she opened it, she found fresh food, a bag of rice, a can of beans, and even a small cut of beef, a luxury she could rarely afford. Her heart leaped into her throat. Who would have left this? Peter and Anna cheered with delight at the sight of the food. "Mama, look! We're going to have a real dinner tonight," they shouted, dancing around the small cabin. Maria tried to smile, but she was torn between gratitude and a deep-seated fear. A gesture like this didn't come without a reason. Who was behind it? Later, when she arrived at the creek, it didn't take long for her to see Andrew sitting quietly in the shade of a large oak tree. Putting the pieces together, Maria marched over to him, her suspicion overriding her usual caution. "Was this you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Andrew simply smiled, his expression calm. "It was nothing. I just thought you and your children deserved a small break." He asked for nothing in return, expected no thanks. He just spoke like someone who genuinely cared. Maria, however, didn't know how to react. Part of her wanted to weep with gratitude, but another part, the part that had been betrayed so many times, screamed in alarm. Her eyes welled up, but she turned away abruptly, returning to her work as if the conversation had never happened. As she scrubbed the clothes with more force than necessary, she wrestled with her feelings. Was this real kindness? Or was it just another one of life's traps, designed to test her? Her heart was in turmoil, caught between the desire to believe and the fear of being hurt again. Her children, however, had no such doubts. For Peter and Anna, Andrew was already someone special. They would run up to him, showing him little treasures they found along the creek bed. Andrew would listen to them with a patient smile, giving them the kind of gentle attention few adults ever did. Maria watched them from a distance, her silence a shield. A part of her melted, seeing his kindness toward her children, but another part of her continued to build walls, trying to stop any flicker of hope from taking root. At the end of the day, as she gathered her clean laundry, she cast a quick glance toward Andrew. He said nothing, just gave a small wave from a distance, a silent promise to be there. And in that simple gesture, Maria felt something inside her begin to shift. The town's gossip spread like wildfire. Every time Maria left her cabin, she felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on her. Some laughed, others whispered loud enough to ensure she heard. "Already found someone to pay her way," they'd say. Maria walked with her head held high, but inside she felt herself breaking. Peter and Anna, however, were oblivious to the cruelty. To them, Andrew was simply their friend, the man who told them stories and treated them with a kindness that was a balm to their mother's weary soul. They defended him with a fierce loyalty that left Maria even more conflicted. How could she turn away something that brought her children such genuine happiness? One afternoon, as she was walking home, two neighbors confronted her directly. "Be careful, Maria," one of them said, her tone dripping with false concern. "Men like that make big promises, then they disappear and leave you with even more scars." Maria took a deep breath and walked away without a word. She had learned long ago that fighting back only gave them more ammunition. But that night, their words echoed in her mind. The fear of making the same mistake, of trusting and being abandoned again, was paralyzing. The scar from her past was still raw, and Andrew's kindness was pressing directly on that old wound. Yet she also remembered the taste of the fresh meat her children had eaten, thanks to his gift. She remembered the sparkle in Anna's eyes when he called her an artist, and the proud smile on Peter's face as he clutched his lucky stone. Andrew hadn't just brought them food, he had brought them moments of pure, unadulterated hope. She knew she couldn't delay her decision any longer. She had to choose, believe Andrew's quiet consistency or retreat back into the fortress of her fear. In that moment, looking at her sleeping children, she realized the choice wasn't just about her, it was about their future. She couldn't let them grow up believing that life was only about pain and sacrifice. They needed to see that hope was real, even if it came with a risk. Closing her eyes, Maria took a deep, shuddering breath and whispered into the darkness, I'm going to trust him, even if it hurts. The next morning, Mariah went to the creek with her children. Her heart was pounding, her hands clammy. She knew Andrew would be there, as he was most days. This time she wouldn't run from the encounter. He appeared as expected, walking slowly down the path. As he approached, he noticed the new firmness in her gaze. Mariah set her laundry aside and faced him directly, her eyes unwavering. "I've thought about what you said," she began, her voice trembling but resolute. "And I've decided I can't live in fear anymore. If your offer is real, I accept." Andrew's eyes widened for a moment in surprise, followed by a broad, sincere smile that lit up his entire face. "You have no idea how much that means, Mariah. I promise you won't regret this. You and your children deserve so much more." Peter and Anna cheered as if they had just been told the greatest news in the world. They ran to Andrew, hugging his legs with pure joy. Mariah watched them, tears welling in her eyes, a mixture of fear and profound relief. Andrew knelt before the children. "You're part of something bigger now," he told them gently, "and I promise I will always make sure your family is treated with the dignity you deserve." Mariah took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. For the first time in years, she didn't feel utterly alone. There was someone willing to walk beside her, not just as a provider, but as a partner. She knew the town's judgment wouldn't vanish overnight. She would still face their stares and their venomous words. But now, there was a crucial difference. She had hope. That day, as she walked back to her cabin, she felt lighter. Each step was a new beginning. She was no longer just the single mother who washed clothes at the creek. She was a woman who, against all odds, had dared to believe again. And deep in her heart, she knew that leap of faith was the start of a new life for her and her children. Just as Mariah found hope when she least expected it, you too have the strength to start over. If this story moved you, please show your support with a like, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments what touched you the most. And don't stop here. Another powerful story is waiting for you on the channel, ready to inspire your heart.